You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time once again to make some picks for Week 17 of the NFL. We got a lot of significant matchups this weekend, consequential games that will decide playoff seeding. So, as always, I invite you to comment down below, join in on the discussion, let me know your thoughts, your opinions on my picks, your picks. What do you think's going to decide some of the games we have this weekend? We're sitting at a record of 149-91, and my goal the last couple of years that I've done this has always been to try to keep it under 100 games incorrect. I sat 2 games under last year, and based off averaging, I feel like we might not make that this year, but we're going to try our best to do so. Beginning with the first game of the weekend, Thursday night football action between the New York Jets taking on the Cleveland Browns. This one in Cleveland. Zach Wilson out for the game, and the Browns could potentially be missing Amari Cooper coming off that 265-yard game he had last week. So some notables on both sides of the football here. Now, one thing I think that is very important to point out is the Cleveland Browns at home. Massive home favorites. They are 7-1 when hosting in Cleveland here, and I do think that could pose a problem for a Jets team that has only 2 wins on the road this season. I did write off Trevor Siemian last week, and obviously that seemed to be a bit of a mistake because he did a solid job against the Washington Commanders. However, this is the Browns defense, not the Commanders, so while, maybe you could say I should have learned from my lesson last week, I'm not so sure about it this week, though. You have 2 of the best passing defenses going head-to-head as the Browns boast a top 10 run defense as well, but the Jets, ranked 24th, have only allowed 100 yards once in their last 4 games, or at least 100 yards in their last 4 games. So there is a very strong defensive matchup here, but the big thing for me really does come down to just the state of the Jets offense versus the state of the Cleveland Browns offense at this point right now. The Jets this season have been averaging 15 points per game, but they have managed 30 twice in their last 2 weeks of play, so there is that to hang their hat on, but that's like a rarity in what we have seen from this Jets team throughout the entirety of the season. Breece Hall did look like a menace last week, and that is definitely something to think about going into this matchup here, but the Browns have been sitting at about 23 points per game, and they've averaged 29 in their last 3 weeks of play, so they've been trending up since Joe Flacco has joined in. And I really do think that he is probably going to be what ultimately ends up the deciding factor of this matchup here. If Joe Flacco continues to play at the level he's been playing at, I have a hard time envisioning a Jets offense that, again, aside from a couple of really good games the last 2 weeks that are sandwiched in between, are on the bread of the sandwich of a goose egg game against the Miami Dolphins, I just don't really know how much I can buy the Jets offense hanging around with the Browns. Both these teams are tops in pressure. The Browns sitting at 9th in sacks, the Jets sitting at 14th, so a little bit lower than them, but they're both teams that can create havoc inside the pocket. Ultimately, though, I really like the Browns in this one here, and it started with just them being 7-1 at home. They don't really lose in Cleveland. It's a great place for them to play in, and the Jets have not traveled well, and offensively, they have not been great all season long, and I don't really know how much I can gamble on the Jets and Trevor Siemian against a Browns defense that has been one of the best, if not arguably the best in the NFL this season. So I'll take the Browns 23-13. Should be an interesting Thursday night football matchup, but I'm not quite sure how close the Jets can really make it. The next game that we're going to be looking at here is going to be the Detroit Lions heading into Dallas to take on the Cowboys in their 7-0 undefeated streak in Dallas. The Lions sitting at 6-2 on the road, not afraid to go into somebody else's house and punch them in the mouth and steal a victory. This is going to be 2 NFC heavyweights with, again, playoff implications on the line. This is a very important matchup for the seeding in the NFC. You have 2 top 5 scoring offenses in the Lions and the Cowboys going head-to-head here. Lions also ranked 5th in passing yards to the Cowboys 6th in passing yards. They love to throw the football. They love to put points on the board. This one is probably going to have some fireworks to it, if I would imagine. The big thing that I'll be watching in this matchup here is going to be how the Lions run the football against the Dallas Cowboys. The Lions since week 8 are averaging 160 yards rushing on the ground. They are tearing it up with their running backs so far, or at least in this back half of the season. The Cowboys Meanwhile, on their side of things, not looking great against defending the run. They've only kept 3 teams in that same span of time from week 8 under 100 yards rushing. So I am a little bit concerned about how they're going to hold up against Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. On the flip side, though, I do have some concerns for the Lions defensively, especially against the pass. Cowboys love throwing the football. They've been very effective throwing the football this season. However, in their last 4 games, they haven't crossed the 300-yard passing mark. So there is a little bit of concern there from Dallas's end, but with just how Detroit has fared against teams throwing the football, this might be a good bounce back or just a get back into that 300-yard mark type of game for the Dallas Cowboys. I do think that's something a lot of people will be weighing in this game as far as this matchup goes, and it's kind of a silly one, but it is something that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be weighing on is, who do you think is a pretender and who's an actual contender between both these teams? They both have some very ugly defeats getting blown out in games this season, and I really do think as far as how you pick this game and who you think is going to come out victorious really comes down to just what team do you believe in more as a legitimate playoff team. How heavily do you weigh those losses, especially the blowout losses that both these teams have suffered, over their heads more so than the other team? And on top of that, I think that this comes down to health, who's going to be available for them. Both teams could potentially be missing offensive tackles, important offensive tackles on that. The Lions, Taylor Decker, and then the Cowboys potentially without Tyron Smith. Would it not be the most Dallas Cowboys thing to blow this game at home, undefeated, must-win scenario for them if they want to keep hopes alive of potentially maybe winning the NFC East? It would be, but I think I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys in this game here. Something tells me the Cowboys can get the job done in this game. I'm a little bit worried about making this pick because the Lions have been a fierce team in the NFC all season long, but to see them kind of struggle to put away the Vikings last week shows me that they're not a perfect team either, and of course the Cowboys aren't themselves. I think it's going to be a close matchup, high-scoring affair, a lot of fun to watch. I have the Cowboys winning 31-30. I really hope this game ends up being a barn burner because it kind of, at least when you look at it on paper, it looks like it should be, so I just hope it lives up to the hype. But I'll take Dallas, undefeated at home, 8-0. They get the win in a very tight contest against the Lions. Moving into the Sunday early window, first game we'll look at here, we have New England being hosted by the Buffalo Bills, trying to make a big sweep of an unlikely opponent in the Buffalo Bills. For Buffalo, there is no option other than to win this game. You put that 29-25 loss from earlier in the season behind you. It's in the rearview mirror. You need to go out and win this football game if you want to maintain your playoff hopes and keep them alive. Since elevating Joe Brady to offensive coordinator, the Bills have averaged about 28 points a game. Since Bailey Zappi took over for the Patriots, they've been averaging about 21, which is about 7 points higher than their season average of 14. So there is a good potential. We might see a little bit more points than you would initially think based off of how these two teams are defensively. The Patriots in recent weeks have started to let some teams score more, but they've been a pretty good team as far as keeping teams out of the red zone is concerned. And then the Bills, they have one of the better teams against pretty much anybody in the NFL when it comes to keeping them out of the end zone in general. But I do think that what this really comes down to is going to be, one, the health of the Patriots, because they seem to have a handful of guys injured right now. They just put Ramondre Stevenson on the injured reserve as well, which I think is going to be a tough blow for the Patriots to overcome. Not only is it going to be health, but also this newly found Bills rushing attack. In the last 6 games, the Bills have averaged 164 yards per. An unbelievable clip for a team that just a few weeks prior to that have not been able to run the football very consistently with the running backs specifically. I need to make sure I highlight that because they can run with Josh Allen, but the running backs have not really put up the numbers you've needed to form a balanced, cohesive offensive attack. Now, Patriots run defense on the flip side, 85 yards per game. They are the, what is the number here? Second best run defense in the NFL. If they can't run the football over there in Buffalo, I'm a little bit concerned with how this game shakes out. The Patriots already got them once, and they're a tough team defensively. And again, the Patriots, they're averaging 7 points per game more than what they were averaging prior to Bailey Zappi taking over. And they've done it against some solid defenses at that. So Buffalo needs to come in. They've got to run the football, commit to running the football. You are in Buffalo. You must get this win here to keep your playoff hopes alive. And I'm going to take Buffalo for the win, but I have them winning 28-20. I saw the spread on this one was pretty large. I'm pretty sure the Bills are like double digits or something like that. I think that's a little bit high. I think the Patriots can hang in there, but I don't think that they can get the job done in Buffalo this time around. I'll take them 28-20. Give me the Bills. Next game we'll look at here, we have ourselves the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Chicago Bears, with the Falcons 2-5 on the road and the Bears 4-3 at home. We have two defenses matching up in this game that have an opportunity to feast on their offensive opponents. First thing to look forward to, in my opinion, is going to be this Falcons rushing attack versus the Bears run defense. The Falcons are ranked 8th in the NFL in rushing to the Bears' #1 run defense. They have been a force up front against running backs all season long. This is not something that's new. It's not something that's cropped up in the back half of the season. All season long, aside from like a few games here or there, and I mean very few games, the Bears have been gobbling up running backs and not letting them get anywhere. Both offenses pretty evenly matched as far as scoring is concerned. Falcons are averaging about 19 points to the Bears 21. I don't really think this is going to be a super high scoring matchup, again, with both defenses being pretty solid and both teams not necessarily lighting up the scoreboard week in and week out. I think one thing, though, that specifically is really helping me lean towards Chicago, and it's not just the emergence of that secondary and the passing defense altogether with how aggressive they've gotten rushing the quarterback, it really comes down to the turnovers. When you look at the Bears, in the last 4 games, have 14 turnovers forced in that month, and that is an unbelievable number to think about. In comparison, the Falcons literally have 16 turnovers forced all season long on defense. Riddle me that. That's insane amount of production in the last month for Chicago. It's not to say that the Bears don't turn the football over, but the Falcons, they are prone to doing it. They have 7 games this season with multiple turnovers. The Bears, again, do have 25. I'm not going to sit here and act like they don't turn the ball over here, but I do think it's worth mentioning that the Falcons can be prone to getting into these games where they just keep turning the ball over and can't stop, and you're going up against a defense that has literally rattled out 14 turnovers in their last 4 games. Atlanta struggles on the road, and right now I feel like we're seeing a little bit of a momentum shift for Chicago, so I'm going to lean Bears on this one. I have them winning 24-19. I think it could be a even lower scoring affair than that potentially, just because, again, both these defenses are pretty good units and they've shut down some potent offenses this season, especially the Bears in the back half of the year. But I like Chicago and some of the complexity that Justin Fields adds. I feel like he's starting to catch a little bit of fire as well at the right time. I like the way this Bears team's trending at this moment, and hopefully they can carry that into next year. Next game we look at, and who would have thought that this one would have playoff implications, but here we are as the 7-8 Las Vegas Raiders go up against the 8-7 Indianapolis Colts. I really cannot believe that this one here has playoff implications on the line. The Raiders defense come in having allowed more than 21 points only once since week 9, and that's good because the Colts offense can be relatively hot or cold depending on the week, scoring 10 points or 31 points depending on who the opponent is. This is a Colts team, though, that can put up numbers when they need to, but like I said, there are just weeks where they come out flat and they stay flat, and with the uncertainty around Michael Pittman right now and that concussion issue that seems to be lingering, we don't really know what offense we're going to get from the Colts coming into this matchup here until we know for sure at least who's going to be suiting up for Indianapolis. The Colts have struggled to keep teams from scoring this season. They're allowing about 25 points per game, and for a Raiders team that's only scored more than 21 points twice this season, that does bode really well for them, especially for a team that is, again, starting to catch a little bit fire. It's another one of those teams. Interim head coach, players clearly love Antonio Pierce over there. I feel like they're playing a lot harder for him than they were for Josh McDaniels just a few weeks ago. I think the biggest hurdle for the Raiders, honestly, in this game, because I'm really not concerned about either the defense or the offense and the way they've kind of been putting things together as of late, is really going to be ball protection. And the reason I say that is because the Colts defense has a takeaway in every single game this season except for last week's matchup against the Falcons. And the Raiders offense does have 24 turnovers on the year. So if they could protect the football, I do think that there's a legitimate shot that the Raiders can take it to Indianapolis, go in and get the job done, and flip the AFC playoff picture a little bit more on its head, as if it's not already kind of upside down at this moment. And with that, I'm going Raiders. Something is brewing over there. I love what I'm seeing, the buy-in from the players, the rallying behind them, this late season push. The Colts, meanwhile, coming off of what was a disastrous loss against the Atlanta Falcons, in my opinion, last week, something tells me the Raiders can come in and get the job done. And the Raiders are not afraid to come into Indianapolis and pull out some wins either. I'll take Raiders 23-20. Tight affair, but I like the underdogs in that one. Next, we can focus in on the Los Angeles Rams being hosted by the New York Jets, and Tyrod Taylor will be getting the start after the benching of Tommy DeVito last week. He presents a bit of a wild card for them offensively, so you can basically kind of throw what you know about the Giants out the window offensively because you don't really know what it's going to look like now with Tyrod Taylor under center. They've averaged about 14 points per game this season. That's all I do know about them. But again, Tyrod, the way he looked last week, looks like he could bring a little bit of oomph to this offense here. And maybe we see some of that this week. However, my biggest concern about the Giants in this matchup with the Rams, who have become a very hot team as of late, has got to be the list of questionables that they have going into this matchup. They have 13 people on the injury report currently, with guys like Saquon Barkley, Dexter Lawrence, Adoree Jackson, to name a few that are on that list. And I mean, even if you're missing, say, only half that number, or even maybe a third of that number of guys, that you're already weakening a roster that I don't think stacks up quite well to the Los Angeles Rams in the way that they've been playing as of late. This Rams offense since week 12 has just been bullying teams, crossing 400 yards in all but one game, sitting at 399. So you could basically say just 400 in all of them, and scoring 30 points in all but one of those games, hitting only 28. I don't really know if the Giants offensively can keep up, and the defense that looked pretty stout at certain points in the season seems to be maybe falling off a little bit as well now that we're getting towards the end of the year. You start to see the weakening and loosening of some of those defenses on the losing teams, and I feel like we might be starting to see that, coupled with the fact that they're ranked 20th against the pass, 29th against the run. This Rams offense with Kyren Williams has been a completely different beast. I don't really know how the Giants keep up. I have the Rams winning 29-13. Next, we can focus on a bird matchup here as the Arizona Cardinals battle the Philadelphia Eagles for avian supremacy here. The Eagles 6-1 at home, and the Arizona Cardinals sitting at 1-7 on the road. I'm going to be honest with you, going to be tough to convince me that this one isn't going to be Philly here. After 4 weeks of nearly 140 yards or more allowed in rushing, the Eagles have tightened up a little bit. That was probably the biggest concern I had for them going through that span there, was just they could not stop the run. But the Cardinals, they're a team that loves to run the football. They're 9th in the NFL, and they just put up 234 yards against the San Francisco 49ers a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, the Cardinals could potentially move the ball again and maybe push that run defense to the limit. Something worth keeping an eye on here, but Philadelphia, from top to bottom, a more talented team in a far better place. I know things were ugly for them for much of the last month or so, basically December altogether for the most part, and even late November, but they seem to maybe be getting on the right track. Turnovers are still a bit of an issue, and I think that with the way the Cardinals defend against the run, which is not great at all, they're allowing at least 110 yards per game this season. There's only been 2 games this year where they have not allowed at least 110 yards rushing, and they've kept teams under that sub 100-yard mark only 2 times this season. I think the Eagles can get back to running the football. It's a trap game for sure, but this is one that the Eagles need to kind of snowball into a couple of victories heading into the playoffs here. So they get the job done. They're in Philly, crowds behind them, lesser opponent. Eagles should win, and they should win fairly handedly, in my opinion. I have them winning 28-17. The next matchup that we're looking at here, we have ourselves the New Orleans Saints taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This one in Tampa in what becomes a very consequential game for the NFC South. You have a Tampa Bay offense that has come to life and found balance as of late. Meanwhile, the Saints just kind of continue to look out of sync, dysfunctional, off schedule, however you want to describe them. They just cannot seem to put a full 4 quarters together. And drive by drive, you really do not know what you're going to get out of this team. The Bucs' newfound run game has slowed a little bit in recent weeks, but I will say this. The New Orleans Saints, they pose a good matchup for them. They're allowing about 126 yards per game on the ground. I believe it's good for like 25th in the NFL or something along those lines. So even if they have slowed down a little bit on the ground, the Bucs could maybe catch fire again here. And on the flip side, the Saints, they might have an issue trying to run the football. Vita Vea and that defensive front over there in Tampa Bay has been a pretty stout unit all season long, and they've only had 6 games this season where they've allowed teams to cross that 100-yard mark. So if the Saints plan on coming in and running the football effectively, I would maybe slow down just a second and maybe think about that. And if that ends up being the case, I don't really know if you can rely on the passing game of the Saints to win this football game here. The Bucs, listen, they have struggled against the pass this season for what it's worth, but my concern regarding the Saints and their passing attack really is the self-inflicted wounds, the overthrows, the dropped catches that are wide open, things like that. I mean, there is definitely a chance that they could go throw for throw with the Buccaneers, but again, weekly, it seems like a problem where either Derek Carr's missing somebody, Chris Olave is dropping a pass. It just seems like you get it each and every single week. In some crucial moments at that, their struggles on third down are also prevalent as well. You can't ignore these issues. I will say, though, that if the Saints can force the Buccaneers into a mistake, obviously, it could lead to a potential upset. However, the Bucs sitting at only 14 turnovers this season on offense, not necessarily the easiest team to force into making those mistakes. And the Saints defense, for what it's worth, yes, they have 22 takeaways this season, but they've only had 4 since week 12. 18 from weeks 1 to 9. And since then, things have just kind of shut off and they've stopped turning the football over as effectively. So, yes, there are some windows of opportunity. They could take advantage of a weak secondary in Tampa Bay. Yes, they could maybe force them into some mistakes, but there are so many self-inflicted wounds from this Saints offense that I just have a tough time buying them beating Tampa Bay here. So I'm going to take the Bucs. I have them winning 28-21. Should be a fun contest here. Like I said, I do think that the Saints have an opportunity. If they can keep the self-inflicted issues to a minimum, they should be able to hang in there, maybe get the upset, but I like Tampa Bay. Next game here, I think this is going to be a foregone conclusion. The San Francisco 49ers are going to beat the Washington Commanders 38-17, in my opinion. I don't really know how you could spin this any other way. I think this one gets ugly. I don't think that the 49ers come in here and show a single bit of mercy. They're angry. They're upset with the way last week went down. A lot of conversation now regarding Brock Purdy. I know that this 49ers team is going to come out here to make a point. And the Commanders, I mean, at this point in the season, they're riding a 6-game losing streak. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. They have a minus 10 turnover differential compared to the 49ers plus 8. I don't really know how you could come up with a Washington Commanders win other than maybe the 49ers are looking ahead. But at this point, the 49ers need to wipe the taste out of their mouth that they had from last week. This one gets ugly. Like I said, 49ers 38-17. I think they run away with this one. Next, we'll look at Carolina taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is one that I think is a little bit closer than some people would expect. The Jaguars are currently riding a 4-game losing streak and sit at 3-5 at home. Could they be the team that hands the Carolina Panthers, who are sitting at 0-8 on the road, their first road victory of the season? I don't know, but there definitely is a possibility. The Panthers' pass defense has been a force all season long, despite the struggles that this team has had, no matter who they've played against. They allow only 175 yards per game. At this point in the season, that is a very low number for a team that only has, 2 victories on the season? Yeah, 2 victories. Coupled that with the fact that there is some serious concern about Trevor Lawrence and all the injuries he's dealing with right now. He's not right. And since that ankle sprain, his accuracy's been off. His interceptions are up. I don't think that he's playing to the best of his ability. And now with 3 injuries that he's been dealing with, because he came back with after a concussion last week, the ankle sprain, AC joint on the shoulder. It's like you're patching this guy together with tape and Band-Aids and hoping he doesn't fall apart. And I respect the hustle. I really do. It's a competitive game. It's a physical game. And Trevor Lawrence wants to tough it out. Playoffs on the line. I get it. But at some point, maybe you want to live to fight another day. I don't know. That might be something that needs to cross the mind of somebody in Jacksonville's either front office or coaching staff. Not only that, if Trevor Lawrence hypothetically can't play, can you trust their rushing attack to really do anything in this matchup here. They haven't crossed 100 yards rushing since week 11. It is week 17. That was 6 weeks ago. A month and a half ago was the last time they hit over 100 yards rushing. I don't really know. Thankfully, Carolina's run defense isn't the most impressive. They're 21st in the NFL, so there is the opportunity that maybe, even if they can't throw the football super effectively, maybe they can run the ball to victory here with Travis Etienne and company. But I don't know. Bryce Young's coming off the best game of his career to this point, 312 yards, couple of touchdowns to boot on top of that, and the Jaguars can't really defend the pass. They're averaging about 257 yards per game. That's good for 29th in the NFL. There is a legitimate window of opportunity that the Panthers have to maybe capitalize on here. I'm going to take the Jaguars, and I have them winning 20-17, but much like my thought process on the Falcons potentially throwing their game against the Carolina Panthers a couple of weeks ago, I'm getting that same feeling again where I'm picking the wrong team for the victory, and I won't be too surprised if I end up being wrong here because the Jaguars are in a very rough way right now, and with a win a couple of weeks ago and taking the Packers to the absolute very end of that contest last week, they've got to be feeling pretty good over there in Carolina, and they're not feeling pretty good over there in Jacksonville. They're 3-5 at home, so it's not like home field advantage has done much for them. I have Jacksonville 20-17, but I would not be shocked to be watching a potential upset in Carolina victory out of that game. Next, we can look at arguably one of the games of the week here. If it's not the Dallas Cowboys and the Lions, it might be this AFC clash between two heavyweights as the Miami Dolphins are hosted by the Baltimore Ravens. The number 1 ranked scoring offense taking on the number 4 ranked scoring offense here. Or, in a more interesting matchup, the number 1 ranked scoring offense versus the number 1 ranked defense in points allowed, as the Ravens are allowing a mere 16 points per game right now. Miami averaging about 31 per in scoring. This one is going to be interesting. I have a few questions about this game that I do think ultimately will kind of decide how this game shakes out. The first one being, can the Dolphins find a weakness in the Ravens' run defense? The Ravens are 12th in the NFL against the run, having allowed 121 yards to the 49ers, 128 to the Rams, 136 to the Bengals, 178 to the Browns, 129 to the Cardinals. They have really good games, but they also have had some pretty bad games against some teams that, maybe raise an eyebrow or two there. When you look at the Bengals, maybe as like somebody who does not run the football well, but they did that week against the Ravens. The second question that I have here is if the Ravens can throw the football effectively against what has been a vastly rejuvenated passing defense over there in Miami. Since week 8, which is also the return week of Jalen Ramsey, or I guess the arrival of Jalen Ramsey because he didn't play prior to that this season, the Dolphins have been shutting down offenses through the air, allowing just an average of 181 yards per game in that span. The Ravens, they're not necessarily the most potent passing attack. However, it has been very fun to watch this offense evolve minus Mark Andrews, as now Charlie Collar and Isaiah Likely have basically kind of opened up the offense on the inside. And I mean, you have some pretty significant wide receivers doing some things as well there. Rashad Bateman has looked really good. Obviously, you have Odell Beckham Jr. over there, Zay Flowers. There's a lot to worry about with that Ravens offense. So curious to see how they fare against this Dolphins defense that has been very good against the pass. I'm also curious about which defense making the big turnover happen when it matters most, as the Ravens lead the league in the NFL with 26 turnovers forced on the year, and the Dolphins not too far behind them, sitting at 23. Both these teams being able to force offenses into mistake, being aggressive. That'll be something worth watching as well. And one more question, who wins on third down? Both these teams are top 10 on offense, converting on third downs. Both these teams are also top 10 on defense, preventing teams from converting on third downs. These are two statistical heavyweights, two of the best teams in the NFL, the two best teams in the AFC going head-to-head right now. Who comes out victorious? For me, after that performance against the 49ers last week, I don't know if I can bet against the Ravens. The Ravens have just looked too good for too long. I considered them the second best team in the NFL for at least a month or more prior to them beating the 49ers. And at this stage in the game, I think the Ravens really do lead the entire NFL. I'll take the Ravens 24-23. I think it's going to be a very close contest. I have a lot of respect for Miami. They're actually my third best team in the NFL right now. So I do think the Dolphins keep it close, but ultimately coming up short in Baltimore for this game. Next, we can look at the Tennessee Titans being hosted by the Houston Texans. And honestly, if CJ Stroud is back in this game, which I am expecting him to be there, I am pretty much all in on the Houston Texans on this one. They took down the Titans a couple of weeks ago, 19-16, without CJ Stroud under center, and with him under center, this almost feels like there's a potential for a runaway here. Maybe not, but the potential is certainly there. Titans offense is pretty much flatlined the last couple of weeks, having put up 28 points in back-to-back games in the 2 weeks prior. But since then, you're not really getting a lot to like, whether it was Ryan Tannehill under center last week, Will Levis the week prior. He has been dealing with an injury as well, so I don't really know what to expect from this team offensively, but the first time they played the Houston Texans, and again, it was only 2 weeks ago, so I feel like the numbers are very worth mentioning in this matchup here. They put up a mere 204 yards of offense altogether, so I'm having a really hard time buying the Titans in this matchup here. I'm assuming Will Levis is going to be good to go based off of everything I've read on the situation, and it's going to be up to him to essentially slice and dice this Houston Texans defense against this Houston Texans passing defense, which is allowing 247 yards per game, but I just don't really know how I could take the Titans this time in Houston with the Texans actually having their starting quarterback. I was burned picking the Titans the first time around, and I do think at this point the Texans, superior team, they got playoff hopes and aspirations alive right now. I think they come in, they play an aggressive football game, but I am going to give the Titans some credit. Mike Vrabel and his teams do not roll over. They're going to fight tooth and nail to the finish, and I think they keep it close. I have the Texans winning 23-20. Not a high-scoring affair, not a blowout by any means, a tight contest, but I do expect the Texans to win. And if I was to put a description on that scoreline, think 23-17, 23-13 with the Titans scoring late to catch up, but ultimately falling short. Moving into the Sunday late window now, we got Pittsburgh going into Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Both of these teams clinging to playoff hopes, with Mason Rudolph looking to be the starter, it sounds like, for a second straight week, coming off a 290-yard performance, couple of touchdowns thrown to George Pickens there. This is a very intriguing contest here. When you look at the Steelers offensively, in my opinion, they look the best when they're able to run the football effectively. They don't necessarily need to lead the game rushing the football, but they need to at least be able to run the football effectively for their offense to really look good. And with the Seahawks having allowed no less than 136 yards rushing in the last 5 weeks, the Steelers have plenty of opportunity for a balanced attack that doesn't necessarily rely on Mason Rudolph to go for another near 300 yards passing. On top of that, for Seattle offensively, they've got to go into this game and they've got to be effective in the red zone. The Steelers let teams move, but when it comes to getting into the red zone, they shut teams down and either just don't let them come away with points or they force them to settle for field goals. They're the 5th best red zone defense in terms of keeping teams out of the end zone this season. So if Seattle wants to come away victorious in this one here, they've got to get the football in the end zone when they get inside that 20. They can't be settling for field goals here. On the flip side, something to note for the Steelers, they're prone to letting teams run the football. They've allowed over 113 yards in 6 of their last 8 games. Now, the Seahawks run game has been a bit of a mixed bag at times. Kenneth Walker was hurt for a little bit, so this is obviously something that is probably deflating some of the numbers, but the Seahawks have crossed 100 yards in only 1 of their last 6 games, and I think that if there was ever an opportunity to have a bit of a bounce back, it's probably against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel like they're so aggressive up front that they allow running backs to get by them, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword where they are so threatening when it comes to pressuring the quarterback, and they just come out, guns a-blazing, full speed ahead right off the snap, that it hurts them in the run at times. So there is that to keep an eye on as well. As for who I think is going to win this game, Seattle's offense has me a little concerned. They've been struggling in recent weeks to put up points, and Pittsburgh, for what it's worth, is competitive every single week, and Mason Rudolph brought a little bit of a spark to this offense here. And I'm very curious to see how this team fares again with Rudolph under center now. I did not expect the performance we got from him last week after not playing for nearly 2 years in official football action. So I think I'm leaning Steelers on this one. I think the defense has enough in the tank to give the Seattle Seahawks some fits. They do love to chase the football. They're very aggressive when it comes to forcing turnovers. I think they could even bring some pressure on Geno Smith in this matchup as well. So I think I'm going to lean Pittsburgh. I actually initially had Seattle chosen for this one, so I'm probably going to eat my words now because I flipped on my choice, and that's usually how that goes. Whenever I flip my choice, I get it wrong. But I'm going to go Pittsburgh. Something in my gut is telling me Steelers. Let's see how this Mason Rudolph train rides for one more week. Next, we have a game that I honestly have no idea how to pick. The Chargers being hosted by the Denver Broncos. We are getting an exciting quarterback matchup of Easton Stick versus Jarrett Stidham. Again, how do you even pick this game confidently? If you're a bettor, I'm assuming you are staying the hell away from this football game, because I would. The Chargers, I will say, brought the fight last week against the Buffalo Bills in their loss, so that is something that is worth mentioning. It feels like this team, a little bit more rejuvenated in the post-Brandon Staley era. There's also the potential that Joey Bosa could make his return. I feel like he might not, but there is the potential. He was activated off the IR, so he's practicing again with the team. I don't know if maybe 2 weeks is too soon. You do have 21 days to get yourself rolling again with the team, so I'll be curious to see, but there is potential that he returns, and I do think that helps the Chargers' chances. However, the biggest thing that sticks out to me from the first time these two teams matched up was just how unable the offense was able to do anything against this Broncos defense. Now, Denver has certainly regressed in recent weeks, especially coming off of that loss on Christmas Eve to the Patriots. That was terrible. But I do think that this is a game that Denver's defense, combined with a solid running attack, could potentially take it to the Chargers and pull off a win. I don't really know with the state of the Chargers right now and just how poor their defense is that I can really buy into what they're doing over there. Again, I know they looked better last week against the Bills and they kind of jumped out to that early lead and kind of scared some people. But for what it's worth, they at least have Sean Payton as their actual head coach in Denver. Again, I do like their defense there. I think I'm going to side Denver on this one. And this is one of those games where I'm really not sure of, and I'm just kind of like making it up as I go, almost like trying to make the reasoning lean more towards my side than anything else. I don't really know how you pick this game confidently. I honestly could not. So I'll take the Broncos 17-10. Would I be shocked if the Chargers come in and just completely blow up Jarrett Stidham in the offense? Absolutely not. But I don't really know. I'll take Denver. Next, we have a game that is far more interesting this week than it would have been maybe a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. But because Cincinnati made their little run with Jake Browning, obviously getting punched in the mouth by the Steelers last week, and then we have the Chiefs, who are faltering at the worst time right now, and frustration is boiling. Playoff implications on the line for this one here. A lot is on the line for Cincinnati's hopes in general, for the Kansas City Chiefs grapple and stranglehold that they've had on the AFC West, I believe for the last 8 or 9 seasons at this point. The Bengals were hot prior to last week going into that matchup against the Steelers, averaging about 32 points per game. The defenses, though, might potentially be catching up to Jake Browning and what he's doing over there and what this offense has been doing to help him out. However, also Jamar Chase wasn't playing last week. That could have potentially affected some things as well. So there's a few things to consider when you look at what happened to them last week offensively against the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, this is a great Chiefs defense, and that is probably the only reason why this Chiefs team is still in contention for potentially defending their Super Bowl championship. Chiefs are 4th in sacks. They're 2nd in pressure. As far as points per game allowed, they're allowing just about 17 points per against their opponents this year. A good defense, a stout defense, one that could bring a lot of pressure, posed some issues for this Bengals team last week. And I honestly think the Kansas City Chiefs have a better defense than Pittsburgh does, so this could be even more problems for Cincinnati. The Chiefs, though, speaking of defenses, must protect the football. Because for what it's worth, the Bengals have 9 games this season with multiple turnovers in that game. They will capitalize if you make mistakes, whether it's a fumble, a poor throw by Patrick Mahomes, a tipped pass off Kadarius Toney's hands, the Bengals are opportunistic when that opportunity presents itself. They will snatch that football away from you if you give them the chance. So yes, the Chiefs defense is great. I would say the Bengals defense, not as good as the Chiefs, but they are an opportunistic bunch that keeps their teams in games. I'm really worried about the state of the Chiefs right now, and again, that frustration over there appears to be boiling. It's getting hot, whether it's between players. We're seeing even some of the coaching now having some issues with the players as well. We saw Andy Reid snatching or basically swiping away the helmet of Travis Kelce when he was going off about something on the sideline. This offense has crossed 20 points only once in the last month, and that was against the New England Patriots a couple of weeks ago. The Bengals are, however, averaging about 26 points per game allowed in that same span, so maybe we could be poised to see a bounce-back game from the Chiefs. I'll take Kansas City 24-17, but I am genuinely concerned about where this Chiefs team is right now, and if by some wild scenario the Bengals upset, I don't even know how wild and unpredictable that would actually be, because this Chiefs offense has not been good. And then to wrap things up, because there's no Monday Night Football this week, thank you, Sunday Night Football, Packers, Vikings, NFC North clash, playoff implications once again on the line for this one here. The Packers defense, one that I called a pretty good unit around the midpoint of the season, and I was spouting off about how good they were, has basically become a doormat for opposing offenses as of late. They are allowing 390 yards total per game since week 10. I have been hearing the calls for defensive coordinator Joe Barry to be fired. Packers fans, I hear you. They will also be without Jair Alexander due to a suspension, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, he decided that he was going to be a captain last week and damn near screwed up the coin toss for them. So that is definitely something worth noting in this matchup here as this defense continues to struggle week in and week out. The Vikings, meanwhile, they have struggled to maybe defend the pass at times, but they're a pretty stout run defense, arguably one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They have only 5 games this season where they've allowed 100 yards or more, and honestly, their season average of 95 per game would be a lot lower if they didn't allow like 200 and something yards rushing. I think it was in week 2. So this has been for the most part, very stout run defense, and that means Jordan Love is going to have to beat this team with his arm. The Vikings are not afraid to rush the passer. Danielle Hunter has one of the highest sacking totals in the NFL this season, and I'm a little bit concerned with how Green Bay is going to hold up if this offense becomes completely one-dimensional and they just simply cannot run the football against the Vikings. With a long list of injuries for the Green Bay Packers, coupled with the fact that the first time this matchup happened, the Packers really could not do a ton offensively. They lost 24-10. They were hardly able to move the football at all in that game there. I think we're heading towards a similar result from the first game. Maybe the Packers find a few more points on the board. Maybe they slow down the Vikings a little bit more. Maybe the Vikings just go crazy on them. I don't know. But Justin Jefferson, I feel like, might have himself a pretty good game with just the way this Packers defense has looked, minus Jair Alexander again. I have the Vikings 23-17. They stomp out the Packers, sweep them in the division this year 2-0, and win to help improve their odds in potentially making the NFC playoff picture. But those are my picks going into week number 17 of the NFL. As always, I invite you to comment down below, share your thoughts on my picks. Let me hear your picks, all of that and more. But that is it for me. If you made it to the end, as always, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.